Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. What happens when a simple mistake leads to an unexpected encounter with someone who could change your life forever? Join us as we follow the journey of a woman caught between her family's expectations and the pull of an intriguing stranger. In this story, love, destiny, and self-discovery collide in the most surprising way. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with life stories. And stay tuned for more captivating tales of unexpected twists and profound connections. The rain came down in sheets, relentless and unyielding. As I stepped out into the chilly evening air, my phone had buzzed, and I quickly glanced at the screen. Uber is arriving in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It felt like an eternity. The prospect of arriving late to Lily's engagement party was one I couldn't bear to entertain. If I didn't show up on time, it would be another mark against me in a family that already didn't quite understand me. I had been waiting on the curb for what seemed like forever, watching the traffic move sluggishly in the downpour. Finally, a sleek, black car pulled up beside me, and I felt a wave of relief. The headlights illuminated the water-slicked street, casting a warm glow across the pavement. I swung the door open and slid into the back seat, flinging my bag onto my lap and letting out a sigh. It was over. The stress, the waiting, all of it. As soon as I fastened my seatbelt, I sank into the soft leather, ready to zone out and let the ride take me to the party. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. A man, dressed in a tailored black suit that looked more expensive than anything I had ever owned, was sitting next to me. His sleeves were casually rolled up, revealing a silver watch that, judging by its size and polish, was worth more than my rent. He was a striking figure, with a defined jawline and piercing blue eyes. He exuded an air of power. But it wasn't just his looks. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident, effortless, like the world bent to his will. And yet, when his eyes met mine, there was a hint of amusement, almost as if he were just as surprised by my arrival as I was by his presence. I froze, my heart racing. I must have made a mistake. "You're not my driver," I said, my voice shaky. He leaned back against the seat, a smirk playing on his lips. "No, I'm not. And I assume you're not here to take my assistant's place?" My stomach dropped. "Wait, this isn't my ride?" He glanced at his phone, seemingly unaffected by my sudden panic. "Unless you happen to be Sophia, which seems quite unlikely." I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. I had clearly gotten into the wrong car. But I didn't want to make a scene. I buried my face in my hands, willing the ground to swallow me up. This was exactly the sort of thing I'd always feared. A moment of humiliation in front of someone I would never want to be humiliated in front of. I hadn't even noticed the driver clearing his throat. His voice polite but firm. "Excuse me, would you prefer that I stop here?" The man next to me exuded a calm authority, as if he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. He turned to me, his eyes softening with a mix of curiosity and challenge. "Where are you headed?" I paused, uncertain. Was it strange to admit that I was headed to an engagement party? I wasn't exactly thrilled about it. "The Grandview Hotel," I replied, my voice quieter now, as though the weight of the truth had somehow become too much. He looked at me, his lips curling slightly at the corners. "Fascinating," he murmured. "That's also my destination." I squinted, suspicion creeping into my mind. "Are you playing games with me?" His smile deepened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something almost genuine in his eyes. "Not in the slightest. It seems destiny has orchestrated our journey together." I didn't know whether to be irritated or amused. Destiny? Was he seriously pulling that card on me? I turned my gaze toward the window, watching the rain pour down, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. It wasn't the time for this awkwardness, this inexplicable pull toward someone I didn't even know. But I couldn't ignore it, no matter how hard I tried. The truth was, I was on my way to a party that was never going to feel like mine. My sister's fiancé, Andrew Montgomery, was from old money, a family that exuded wealth and power. They saw me as an inconvenience, a wild card they hadn't quite figured out how to fit into their perfectly polished world. And honestly, I didn't know how to fit into it either. The man next to me shifted slightly, as though sensing the shift in my mood. "You don't seem to fit the rosewood mold," he said, his voice casual yet observant. I glanced at him, irritated. "And what precisely is the rosewood style?" His eyes sparkled with amusement. "Excessively adorned, affected, disinterested." He wore that smug smile, like he knew something I didn't. "You, however, appear distinct." I narrowed my eyes, ready to retort, but I held back. "Are you trying to offend me with that?" "Absolutely not," he replied, his tone still playful, but there was something more to it now. Something I couldn't quite place. "It's just an observation." I leaned back in my seat, crossing my arms, determined not to let this turn into an unpleasant conversation. "My purpose isn't to provide entertainment. I'm just attending my sister's engagement celebration." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "You don't seem excited about it." I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "The situation is complicated. Family drama." He regarded me for a long moment before speaking again. "Domestic turmoil?" I nodded, feeling the weight of it all in that one simple sentence. It was complicated, yes. Too complicated for me to explain to someone I barely knew, let alone someone who probably had never experienced anything resembling the mess I had made of my life. I glanced at him, noticing the faintest flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I don't belong in their world," I said softly. "Neither do I," he replied, his tone unexpectedly earnest. I blinked, surprised by the depth of his words. What was it about him that intrigued me so much? I barely knew him, and yet he seemed to see right through the walls I had built around myself. The car slowed, and we came to a stop in front of the Grandview Hotel. The valet was already approaching the car, ready to open the door. Before I had a chance to respond, he was already out of the car, walking toward the entrance without a backward glance. "Wait," I called out, suddenly feeling a little more than embarrassed. "Your name?" "I don't even know your name." He stopped and turned, giving me a deliberate smile. "William," he said simply. "William Foster." And then, without another word, he disappeared into the hotel, leaving me standing there, a little dazed, a little unsure of what had just happened. There was something about him, something distinct, captivating, and oddly familiar. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew one thing for certain. This night was not going to be anything like I had imagined. The Grandview Hotel was everything I had imagined it would be and more: grand chandeliers, delicate flower arrangements, and a polished marble floor that seemed to reflect every perfect, well-dressed guest in attendance. The scent of roses filled the air, mingling with the faint notes of expensive perfume. I felt a wave of self-consciousness wash over me. My navy blue dress, though lovely, lacked the designer label that adorned so many others in the room. The outfit felt like a poor imitation in a world that reveled in exclusivity. I adjusted the fabric, straightening my posture as my heels clicked against the floor, echoing loudly in the vast ballroom. Lily, my older sister, looked as stunning as ever in her pink gown. She was effortlessly at home in this world, graceful, elegant, and poised. The glittering diamond bracelet she wore sparkled under the chandeliers, a testament to her newfound life within the Montgomery family. I, on the other hand, felt like a stranger. Emily, my best friend and Lily's maid of honor, spotted me across the room and immediately made her way over. She looped her arm through mine, guiding me toward the center of the room. "You're late," she murmured under her breath, her expression tight with concern. "We need to make a good impression." "I got delayed," I responded vaguely, avoiding the full truth about my Uber mishap. The last thing I needed was to explain the awkward encounter with the man in the black suit. Emily exhaled, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Now that you're here, just do your best to behave. I don't need any more complications with the Montgomerys." I nodded, understanding what she meant. The Montgomerys were an old money family steeped in tradition and power. They wielded influence that could make or break you, and they regarded me, at least in my mind, as a mere inconvenience. But I had no choice. Lily's happiness mattered to me. And this party, though overwhelming, was an important moment in her life. We made our way through the throng of guests, who were deep in conversation about stocks, business dealings, and extravagant vacations in places I could only dream of visiting. The words felt alien to me, and I did my best to suppress the growing feeling of being an outsider. I could hear snippets of high-powered talks, but none of it felt relevant to me. I just had to survive a few hours. That's when I saw him. William, standing by the bar. His presence was impossible to miss. He was engaged in conversation with an older man, someone who had a distinguished air about him, possibly one of the Montgomerys. William was dressed impeccably, as usual, his sharp suit fitting him like a second skin. His effortless posture and the ease with which he interacted with everyone around him caught my eye immediately. I was stunned. What was he doing here? Our gazes locked across the room. It was as though time had slowed down for a brief moment. His lips curled into a knowing smile, the same smirk that had accompanied our earlier encounter in the car. I swallowed hard, a flutter of anxiety taking root in my chest. He had to be here for some reason. Before I could process it fully, Emily pulled me toward her, not giving me time to analyze the situation. "Grace, I'd like you to meet Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual, signaling her own nerves. I turned, and there he was, Andrew Montgomery, towering and distinguished. His silver hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of authority. He extended his hand, and I took it, my grip firm but polite. "So, you must be the younger Harper sister," he said smoothly. "Emily's mentioned quite a bit about you." I smiled, trying to keep my composure. "I trust all is well," I replied, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my presence here was more of a formality than anything else. Just as I was about to speak further, a voice interrupted the conversation. "I notice you've encountered Grace." It was William. He walked smoothly into our circle, his presence commanding the room once again. Andrew greeted him with a warmth that surprised me, and their conversation quickly shifted. "I was surprised to find you here this evening," Andrew said, his tone more relaxed now. William responded effortlessly. There was a sudden change in plans. His gaze flicked over to me, a spark of amusement lighting up his features. "And I'm quite pleased it turned out this way." I froze for a moment. Was I imagining it, or did he just imply that his presence here wasn't by chance? As I continued to stand there, trying to process the situation, another familiar voice interrupted. Andrew's fiancée, Lily's soon-to-be sister-in-law, approached us, greeting William with a handshake that suggested a history between them. "Andrew, William, good to see you both." I took a step back, unsure of where to position myself in this rapidly shifting dynamic. It was becoming clear that William was far more involved in this world than I had realized. And the more I watched him, the more I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. But I wasn't ready to admit it, not yet. There was a small part of me that hoped this was all some strange coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. This night, this event, had just taken a turn I hadn't anticipated. And I had no idea what would happen next. The evening continued to unfold around me, like a well-rehearsed play where everyone knew their lines. Except for me. I drifted through the ballroom, my eyes scanning the guests, trying to find something familiar, something comforting amidst the grandeur. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was simply a visitor in a world I would never belong to. My sister, Lily, was floating through the crowd with ease, as though she had always been a part of this sophisticated world. But I wasn't like her. I was the odd one out, the one who didn't quite fit in. As the night wore on, I found myself reluctantly sipping champagne, pretending to engage in conversations I didn't care about. Business deals and power plays seemed to dominate the air. I had been to events like this before, but tonight felt different. It was more than just my discomfort, it was the lingering presence of William that I couldn't ignore. Every time I glanced around the room, there he was, standing by the bar, talking to someone, his posture calm and controlled, his every word measured and thoughtful. It didn't take long for me to notice how his presence commanded attention. People seemed to gravitate toward him effortlessly, drawn to the confidence he exuded. And yet, when he looked at me across the room, it felt as though time slowed down. His gaze was steady, assessing, and for a moment, I thought I could see something else, an understanding, a recognition, as if he saw me for who I truly was, beyond the walls I had carefully constructed around myself. And then, as if to prove my point, he moved toward me, his strides long and purposeful. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to compose myself. Why did he have this effect on me? I barely knew him, yet, every time we crossed paths, there was an undeniable pull. "Grace," he said, his voice smooth and warm, cutting through the noise of the party. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "No," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not at all. It's just busy in here." "I can imagine," he said with a small chuckle. "But I must admit, I find the conversation here to be a little lacking." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Lacking?" He smirked, leaning against the bar. "Yes. Everyone's too busy talking about things that don't matter. Business, wealth, status. I prefer to talk about things that actually mean something." I felt a strange sense of connection with him in that moment. It was as though he saw beyond the surface, beyond the glittering facade that most people at this party had carefully curated. There was something raw about him, something that made me feel like I wasn't the only one who felt out of place. "What do you talk about, then?" I asked, almost without thinking. He met my gaze, his eyes intense. "I talk about the things that people are afraid to acknowledge. Their fears, their desires, what they truly want in life. Most people are too busy trying to fit in to actually be themselves." I looked at him, unsure of how to respond. There was something so direct, so honest in his words. It felt like he was speaking directly to me, as though he knew the internal struggle I'd been hiding for years. "I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about all that," I said, my voice quieter now. He smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "No one is, not at first, but sometimes it takes someone to make you see it." His eyes softened, "And sometimes, the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. Whether you're ready or not." I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within me. The truth. What was the truth? That I didn't belong here? That I was terrified of the world I was about to step into? Or that I had been running from something inside myself for far too long? Before I could answer, Emily appeared beside me, her eyes darting nervously between William and me. "Grace," she said, her voice higher than usual, "I need to introduce you to someone. You're not going to believe it." I turned toward Emily, but my thoughts were still racing, still tangled in the unexpected connection I felt with William. What was it about him? Why did he make everything seem so much more complicated? The questions swirled in my mind as I followed Emily, the warmth of the moment with William still lingering in the air. As the night wore on, everything seemed to fall into place. Yet nothing felt settled. The encounter with William lingered in my mind, his words reverberating in my thoughts. I couldn't deny the connection, the pull between us that I couldn't fully understand. But in that moment, standing in the ballroom full of strangers, I realized that this was the beginning of something much bigger than a mere chance encounter. By the end of the evening, as the final notes of the string quartet echoed through the room, I found myself alone on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my skin. I hadn't expected it to be like this. The grandness of the night had lost its allure, and I was left with nothing but the quiet hum of my own thoughts. Then, as if on cue, William stepped out onto the balcony, his figure silhouetted by the lights from within. He moved towards me, his expression unreadable yet familiar. "I didn't expect you to be here," I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I didn't expect you to be here either," he replied with a smile, his eyes intense. He stepped closer, his presence both comforting and overwhelming at the same time. "Grace, I told you I don't do things halfway. I know what I want. And I want you in my life. For real." His words, direct and filled with sincerity, shattered every hesitation I had left. In that moment, the confusion, the fear, Everything seemed to fall away. I wasn't running anymore. The kiss he placed on my lips was soft but full of promises unspoken. And for the first time, I let myself believe that sometimes, love wasn't just something you found, it was something you allowed yourself to accept. For more life stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for the next video.